Shalom. This Shabbat we read Parashat Naso. It's the second Torah portion in the book of Bamidbar. Numbers begins in chapter 4 and verse 21. And in chapter 5 we read about the Sota, the suspected adulteress, the wayward wife. And it's a concept of a woman who had been secluded with another man, a married woman who had been secluded with another man, and there passes over her husband a spirit of jealousy. He becomes obsessed with jealousy and wants to determine whether or not his wife had been unfaithful to him, which would of course render her to be defiled. And there is a process here, a very mysterious process that's described in the verses of some sort of divine intervention in testing the fidelity of the woman. And every time we discuss this, first question that comes to mind is, well, why doesn't the husband also have to, at times perhaps, prove his fidelity? Why is there no suspected husband? The truth is that the husband also has to be perfect and has to prove it. And there are times in history where everyone has to prove their fidelity, because this is more than just the individual idiom of this husband and wife. What we're really talking about here, Torah is telling us about the concept of a covenant, what a relationship is really all about, what it is to make a promise of faithfulness to someone. It's not only a concept of husband and wife, because husband and wife are merely the vehicle that express the broader, greater truth of the concept of our relationship with the Almighty. And as we're going to see, there have been incidents and will be more incidents wherein the entire nation, or perhaps every single person, really have to prove that they do have a covenant. In any event, first of all, you should know that if the husband was not perfectly upright, and if the husband had ever been unfaithful, then this would not even work. It can only work if the husband himself has no blemishes on his record. But you also have to understand, this is not something which is arbitrarily thrust upon the woman to make her miserable, to torture her, to embarrass her, to punish her. The fact is, this test that's described here in chapter 5 of Parashat Naso is only administered if the woman is being very cagey. For whatever reason, she doesn't have anything to say. She doesn't admit it, and she doesn't deny it. In that case, she is administered this divine test, which is designed, if she is innocent, to bring about a state of reconciliation and to emphasize the love that exists between the husband and wife. So actually, if she was guilty and just admits it, then of course that marriage ends in divorce, because a woman who has been with another man is rendered impure for her husband and she has to leave him. But there's no penalty for her at all. Nothing will happen to her if she would admit it. So this is a whole kind of mysterious business. And of course what goes on in privacy of every person's life, also on the spiritual level, is being alluded to here. In any event, there is a process here wherein the woman is brought to the holy temple, and the Kohen has her stand before Hashem, as the verse tells us, and the Kohen takes sacred water from a sacred vessel in the holy temple, and he takes from the earth that is in the floor of the tabernacle. Here we're talking about the tabernacle and later in the holy temple, and he mixes it in the water. And this is called the bitter waters that cause curse. Because then the Kohen adjures the woman and says to her, if a man has not lain with you, and you have not strayed in defilement with someone other than your husband, then be proven innocent of these bitter waters that cause curse. But if you have strayed with someone other than your husband, and if you have become defiled, and a man other than your husband has lain with you, the Kohen shall adjure the woman with the oath of the curse. And the Kohen shall say to the woman, may Hashem render you as a curse and as an oath amongst your people, when Hashem causes your thigh to collapse and your stomach to distend. These waters that cause curse shall enter your innards, etc., etc. The Kohen writes these curses on a scroll and dips this scroll into the bitter waters, and the words are erased into the water. Now, our sages tell us that if the woman indeed was innocent, those waters actually remain inside of her. And then when she is with her husband, that union is blessed, and the child is born free of any sort of blemish, and it's a miraculous birth. It's an easy birth. It's everything about that child is totally blessed from these waters. But indeed, if she is not innocent and was not admitting it, then these waters will be the source of her death. The name of God is written twice in these verses. According to our Holy Zohar, one time it's written frontwards, in the proper order. The second time it's written backwards. So the first time when it's written frontwards corresponds to the blessing. The second time when it's written backwards, that's an aspect of din, of harsh judgment. It corresponds to the curse. And of course our sages make it clear how unusual this is, because there's a prohibition in the Torah against erasing the name of God. It's a form of taking the name of the Lord in vain. But yet our sages tell us that God so cherishes the love and the state of peace, shalom bayit, the harmony of the home that exists between husband and wife, that he allows his name to be erased for the sake of peace. So all of this is actually amazing. But what about this whole idea, the whole mystery of the process that we're dealing with earth and water? Truth is, our sages tell us there's a very beautiful understanding here. You see, this is so elemental. We're dealing here with the basic elements of the world, with earth and with water, because actually this covenants, this agreement, this fidelity that we all want to have, it's the fidelity, it's the covenant between all of creation and the Almighty. The earth and the ocean, they stay within their confines. They have a covenant, because God brought them forth into creation and gave them their instructions. But maybe if this woman is guilty and she represents this spirit of rebellion that we find in creation, so we take from the earth, which is closest to the ground zero of the state of creation at its most sacred point, the place of the Holy Temple where all matters are aligned perfectly, and from that earth, which is so close to fulfilling the desire of God, this is very beautiful, the word eretz, earth, is related to the word ratzon, the will of God. The very earth fulfills the ratzon, the will of God. We take that earth, we take from the sacred water, because when God brought forth all of creation, he separated the waters, the upper and the lower waters. Verse in Genesis tells us. And the lower waters cried, and they keep on crying because they're separated from that upper sphere. And if this woman indeed broke her alliance with her husband, representing the alliance that all of creation has with God, then she is causing that separation between the upper waters and the lower waters to grow even deeper. And she is making that separation ever more vast. And so there are aspects here of elemental forces at work, earth and water, in the revelation of the status of this woman. And the truth is, it's about trust, it's about a covenant, and it's not only about the woman's faithfulness, it's about the man's faithfulness as well. And there were several incidents in history when the entire nation of Israel had to go through this very process, the process of proving fidelity and proving that we are not adulterers. The more famous of the two incidents is the second one, which appears right after the debacle of the golden calf. In Parashat Kitisa, we find in Exodus chapter 32 that as Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, our master, descended from Mount Sinai, it happened as he drew near the camp and saw the calf and the dances that his anger flared up. He threw down the tablets from his hands and shattered them at the foot of the mountain. He took the calf that they had made and burnt it in the fire. He ground it into a fine powder and sprinkled it over the water. He made the children of Israel drink. Now what does this remind you of? What is this reminiscent of, making the children of Israel drink this solution? This was a type of bitter waters. The children of Israel at that time were like suspected adulteresses. They were all in the confines, halachically, of the concept of sota. And God wanted to prove their fidelity. But actually before this, there was another incident wherein the entire nation had to prove themselves. And it was in Parashat Bishalach. It's in chapter 15, where we find the incidents of the place called Marah. And there, Moshe caused Israel to journey from the Sea of Reeds, and they went out to the wilderness of Shur. They went for a 3-day period in the wilderness, but they did not find water. They came to Marah. They could not drink the waters of Marah because they were bitter. And remember that the waters of the Sota in our parsha are called the bitter waters. Therefore they named it Marah, which means bitter. The The people complained against Moshe, saying, "What shall we drink?" He cried out to Hashem, and Hashem showed him a tree, threw it into the water, and the water became sweet. There he established for the nation a decree and an ordinance, and there he, meaning God, tested the nation. And this mysterious issue here of the tree, which is actually quite a complex idea, what happened, but it was also this aspect of Hashem's name being dissolved in the water. This was a test of Sota, because our sages tell us that after the people of Israel exited Egypt, they were suspected, the men were suspect of having been with the Egyptian women, and the women having been with the Egyptian men. And the Midrash tells us Hashem wanted to give them one final test. And this was it. And every single member of the nation of Israel, male and female alike, proved their total innocence and their total fidelity to Hashem. At this incident in Mara, they proved that they actually escaped from Egypt, the land which is synonymous with immorality. They escaped unscathed, and they proved their total fidelity. And the Holy Zohar tells us the most incredible teaching on this whole concept. And it's absolutely mind-boggling. The Holy Zohar tells us that this process of clarification and of the testing of the Jewish people, men and women alike, regarding our covenant with the Almighty, this process is not yet over. The Zohar tells us that in the future, in the final exile, which is happening now, the children of Israel will be in the lands of the diaspora, in the lands of the exile, and those lands, their very presence in those lands will be for them a testing of Sota. Their presence in those lands will facilitate a test of bitter waters that will determine which of them have remained loyal in their covenant to their truly betrothed one, the Holy One, blessed be He. And the Zohar tells us that there is a verse in the book of Daniel which actually refers to this future, or is it perhaps present, test. The spirit of jealousy this time passes over the husband who is the Almighty. Children of Israel are being tested in the exile, and the secret of this test, the Zohar tells us, is the verse in Daniel in chapter 12 that reads, verse 10, "They will be elucidated and clarified and refined by many people." They, meaning the children of Israel, will be clarified, will go through these machinations. The people themselves in the exile will be for them the bitter waters. They will be elucidated and clarified and refined by many people. The wicked will act wickedly, and none of the wicked will understand, but the wise will understand. And the Zohar concludes and tells us that those amongst the children of Israel that do not pass the test in the exile, the land itself, like the bitter waters of the Sota, the land itself will kill them. This is the test of our time, the test of fidelity, which the exile will ultimately prove that not one of us, not one of the children of Israel has strayed, that all of us have kept our covenants with our betrothed, the Holy One, blessed be He.